Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grandmaster Knockout. In the left corner, the one, the only, Pragg. And his opponent, ladies and gentlemen, Vidit. Tonight, one board, 64 squares, playing white, Pragg, playing black, Vidit. Gentlemen, let the battle begin. Pragg, pawn to e4. Vidit, pawn to f5. Pragg, knight to f3. Vidit, knight to c6. Pragg, pawn to g3. Vidit, knight to f6. Pragg, pawn to d3. Vidit, bishop to c5. Pragg, bishop to g2. Vidit, pawn to d6. Pragg, castles kingside. Vidit, castles kingside. Pragg, pawn to h3. Vidit, pawn to a5. Pragg, king to h2. Vidit, pawn to h6. Pragg, pawn to c4. Vidit, bishop to d7. Pragg, knight to c3. Vidit, rook to e8. Pragg, knight to d2. Vidit, knight to d4. Pragg, knight to b3. Vidit, knight takes b3. Pragg, pawn takes b3. Vidit, pawn to c6. Pragg, pawn to f4. Vidit, pawn to b5. Pragg, pawn to f5. Vidit, queen to b6. Pragg, queen to f3. Vidit, king to f8. Pragg, pawn to g4. Vidit, king to e7. Pragg, rook to a2. Vidit, pawn to a4. Pragg, pawn takes b5. Vidit, pawn takes b3. Pragg, rook takes a8. Vidit, rook takes a8. Pragg, pawn to h4. Vidit, rook to h8. Pragg, bishop to h3. Vidit, king to d8. Pragg, bishop to d2. Vidit, king to c7. Pragg, rook to a1. Vidit, king to b8. Pragg, queen to d1. Vidit, pawn to h5. Pragg, knight to a4. Vidit, queen takes b5. Pragg, knight takes c5. Vidit, pawn takes c5. Pragg, pawn takes h5. Vidit, queen takes d3. Pragg, bishop to c3. Vidit, queen takes d1. Pragg, bishop takes a5, check. Vidit, king to c8. Pragg, rook takes d1. Vidit, rook takes h5. Pragg, bishop takes f6. Vidit, pawn takes f6. Pragg, king to g3. Vidit, rook to h8. Pragg, rook to d3. Vidit, pawn to c4. Pragg, rook to c3. Vidit, king to c7. Pragg, rook takes c4. Vidit, rook to b8. Pragg, rook to c3. Vidit, king to d6. Pragg, king to f4. Vidit, pawn to c5. Pragg, bishop to f1. Vidit, rook to h8. Pragg, rook to d3, check. Vidit, king to e7. Pragg, rook takes b3. Vidit, rook takes h4, check. Pragg, king to e3. Vidit, bishop to c6. Pragg, bishop to g2. Vidit, king to d6. Pragg, rook to b6. Vidit, yeah, king to c7. Pragg, rook to a 6. Vidit, rook to g4. Pragg, bishop to f3. Vidit, rook to g1. Pragg, rook to a 7, check. Vidit, king to b6. Pragg, rook takes f7. Vidit, pawn to c4. Pragg, rook takes f6. Vidit, king to c5. Pragg, rook to h6. Vidit, rook to e1, check. Pragg, king to f4. Vidit, rook to b1. Pragg, rook to h2. Vidit, rook to f1. Pragg, rook to d2. Vidit, bishop to e8. Pragg, king to a3. Vidit, rook to e1, check. Pragg, king to f2. Vidit, rook to b1. Pragg, pawn to a5. Pragg lands the knockout. Vidit has no answer. If you love this fight, smash that like button and subscribe. More legendary battles are coming your way. See you in the next one.